to introduce our speaker to this section. She's one of the co-founder of this community in the person of Joy Emedom. She's a dynamic and a highly accomplished cybersecurity professional. Joy currently works as a data protection manager and solution architect at Azure, based in Dublin, Ireland, with over 13 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity. She has led and implemented secure enterprise-grade solutions across various industries. Wow, that's a very big kudos. Let's put our hands together for our amazing speaker today. Joy is not only passionate about technical excellence, but also deeply committed to giving back to the tech community. And that's why we have her here today to give back to the community. She is the co-founder of the Mama Cyber Shield. Wow, I've been hearing of this Mama Cyber Shield. I didn't even know that she's one of the people that founded it. Wow, that's a nice one. An initiative that equips stay-at-home moms with cybersecurity skills, empowering them to build meaningful career in tech. Wow, that's a good one from our speaker. And she's also a mentor, speaker, and author known for simplifying complex topics and making cybersecurity more accessible, especially for beginners. Joy has spoken at major conferences like Women in Tech, Cybersecurity Summit, and she actively supports early career professionals through mentorship and community program. Today, she will be sharing an insightful experience with us today. So let us just stay tuned as we hand over the floor to Madam Joy. Thank you very much, ma'am. You have the floor.
Hello, I was like, is it me that has all these accolades? Eh? Can you hear me, please?
Yes, ma, I can hear you, ma, very
All
clearly,
right,
ma'am.
Yes, ma, we can.
just give me 1 minute, please. I need to. Wow. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. Um, it's a pleasure to be here. Hi, everybody. I would go off camera at some point because um, I'm a mom. As much as I'm in tech, I'm a mom, and I have my kids everywhere. And that's why I like what I do, because I help other moms see that being a wife and a mom should not deter you from achieving your dreams. Especially fingers crossed that you have a good and supportive partner. But I like to um, allow people see that space of mine. So why a lot of people would say a day in the life of my typical day in the life would happen when I'm doing my presentations, and I would tell people, I say it doesn't deter me. That's the reality. So there'll be times I'll have to go off camera, either because I'm going to tell somebody, be quiet, don't make noise, you know. But the whole idea is I'm happy to be here. I struggled to try and squeeze everything. So what we're going to be doing today is just look at the overview and then focus on one particular tool for governance. The whole idea is with the meetup is to introduce these topics to us to get interested and exciting about certain technologies. I took some time to go through I've not been able to attend all the meetups, but I took some time to go through some people's sessions, and I'll be doing some reference to one or two people's sessions to help drive home the point of what we'll be doing today. Let me see. I had the last minute. Um, not the way you say wardrobe malfunction, slide malfunction, but let's see how to get it through. All right. I'll be pulling up my slide. Um, do one thing for me today. If there's nothing you achieved today, make sure you meet somebody new today. So please drop whatever way you want to connect with someone through on the chat. The Sorry, am I struggling to find my share button? I have the ability to share, right? But I can't see my system. Okay. Let me try this other option. Let me see if this works. It's strange, it's happening. I can't see my system when I click on share. If it's the person that, let's see. Please give me 1 minute to upload and see if that works. All right, while we're waiting for my upload to happen, if you have worked with Microsoft Azure, I would like to see a double thumbs up. If Microsoft Azure is new for you, you saw this flyer somewhere, you got excited. What's Microsoft Azure? What are they talking about? Let me see a 1 thumbs up. If you're familiar with Microsoft Azure, but maybe not familiar with this particular governance, then maybe a 3 thumbs up would do. Thank you. Well, I'm getting one. Presenting. Well, you see my slide a few minutes ago?
Yes, you can see it is up.
Is it up now?
It's up, yes, it's up.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, welcome everybody. And thanks again to our organizers for keeping us on the toes with our learning since January. A big thumbs up to all of you who have consistently showed up. It's encouraging. When we decided to revive the MCT Niger group, trust me, we didn't even know what we were doing. But one thing we know was that in the Nigerian African region, the Microsoft security portfolio was not getting so much visibility as it should. And so we felt that it was very important that we showcased Microsoft security capabilities. One thing I would like to encourage everybody here, if you are not yet a member or you know, if you've not joined us in our in the group, please do, because as we grow, we would need everyone's level of experience, your innovation, your ideas to see how to expand the community. One thing that I'm very confident about is that Microsoft is still scratching the surface of security. So there's a huge opportunity from a learning perspective, from job opportunities in the Microsoft security space. So come along, let's see how to share our knowledge in this space and see how to get you to be an authority in this space. We'll be looking at planning, implement, manage governance for security. We can't use 1 hour to extensively talk about this topic. Trust me, if you had time to look at the Microsoft Learn for this, you can't extensively, digest this in 1 hour. So what I have done
You actually
is
have 2 hours, Madam John. You actually have 2 hours of the session.
Oh, okay. Even with 2 hours. Even
Yes.
with 2 hours. Yeah. Especially permit me, with the way that I try to teach, right? Most times I try to teach trying to explain things in the most simplified way. I am one of those who was not classified as an A class student or A plus student. So when I grew in my career, one of the things that I told people that helped me was the ability to simplify things, right? And I said to them, while the school system didn't grade me as an A student, I have excelled in my career just because I understood how to interpret things differently from the way I was being taught. So I said to myself as personal commitment, if I have to teach people, I will not make things look so cumbersome such that they begin begin to think that they don't have the capability to do it. So I try my best to make things as simple as possible, just so that everybody understands that we can all do this thing, right? Like they say in the Nigerian slangs, where the people where they do them, they no get to head. Okay, so that might just make my own teaching extend a bit, and what I would like to maximize as well. So we really cannot, exhaust this. So what I will be doing will be focusing on what governance and security means, explaining what it means, and then we'll focus on a couple of tools. So when we talk of governance and security, one will beg to ask, what's the relationship, right? Security, right? Oh, we're securing things, right? We want to protect things. We want to make sure that things are not compromised. But when we see governance, I won't lie to you, when the word governance is heard, first thing you hear is, I don't know, what does that, let me see in the chat, let's explore. When you hear governance, what does it mean to you? I hear control. Sometimes I hear control. Sometimes I hear putting things in order. Let me hear what the word, governance means for you when you hear it. So in the world of today, in the cloud first world, securing the environment is not just only about technical. It's not just saying, oh, what is the technical challenge, right? It's a strategic responsibility when you want to secure the cloud, especially in the cloud environment. I don't know, for those of you who are in tech, how long you've been in tech. For those of us who came all the way from the years of on-prem, right? You would see how it's not like it was easy, but because everything stayed in your data center, you could put certain restrictions. But now in the cloud, right, automatically what that means is that as long as there's internet, you can access that resources. So when you begin to think of governance, right, it's not just the technicality around, the cloud infrastructure, it's how you want to be strategic about it, right? So today we will explore planning, implementing, and managing governance, how it empowers and secures us, especially from a compliance and regulatory perspective. And our focus is on Azure. So while you can do this on any cloud infrastructure, our focus is on Azure. So while we'll be looking at the whole high level and overview of approach and recommendations and styles to do this, we would bring it back home into Azure. Governance is not about control, right? So while for someone like me, I say the word governance, I'm like control. Somebody said policies, yeah. It's more around how do we enable trust and scale it, right? So security is protecting things. Governance is coming and saying that, I trust you. I know that you know what you're supposed to do. I know you're aware that you're supposed to do this. I know that you have done this, but at what way are we trusting ourselves that you have done what you need to do? Right? And how am I going to ensure that you have done what you need to do and still make it not very mundane, make it very strenuous, so that we can scale this up in the event where you bring more elements into the environment, you bring more systems into the environment, and we can make sure that you're adhering to these requirements and governance. So that's what governance is about. Again, a quick one of what the expectation at the end of this call will be for you would be that you understand the relationship between governance and security. You would see we would talk about the recommended structured approach that Microsoft gives when we talk about governance in the Microsoft, which is the Azure space. And we would now look at some of the tools that Microsoft recommends with focus on the Azure Key Vault and the Azure policy. I call them very simple, quick, quickie. Like I said, I like to make things very easy for people. We'll talk about other tools, but just focus on these two tools for this class, just so that you can hold something to say that at the end of this, I'm now aware of what this means. I can leave this class worthy of my 2 hours and what it means, not have so much, and I'm not able to pinpoint the value of what I've done. I'm not going to spend time on myself. The moderator has done an extensive job. I would like to connect with people, so I'll drop my LinkedIn, on the chat. I'd like to meet you. I'd like to know you, and I'd like to see how we can help you excel in this career journey. If there's any place that's been vague, confusing, please reach out to me through any of my social media. I am on the WhatsApp group, so I'm happy for you to send me a direct message. That's fine. Just introduce you from MCT Niger group, and I'll see how to give you access to free mentorship sessions, just to help you make sure that you make good use of your time in the community. Our joy is to see every one of us come at the top and succeed. The opportunity in security is vast, right? And so there's no worry and scare of anybody taking anybody's job. I want to see you succeed as much as I do. And please feel free, don't be a stranger. Can we talk about governance without even understanding why? Why does cloud governance matter? What's the importance of it? I want to do this referring to two cybersecurity incidents that have happened over the years. And there are a whole lot, but I just picked out these two because it will help us connect to the two tools that we'll be looking at down the line. On April 1st, 2021, Codevco, they became aware that a threat actor had gained authorized access to their bash upload script. So this is a script that they use for deploying of call it containers. And so they had this uploader script that had been altered, and it was used in an image creation. So the Docker image creation process had embedded in it some sensitive credentials. And so this was compromised during the creation and continuous integration, moving from development into release environment. Now, this is me paraphrasing, but you can take time to research around the CodeCov cyber attack. It was around credentials being not properly secured, and because of it was improperly secured, it got exposed, and so attackers were able to penetrate into the system. Another one was the Uber hack. When you try to research about this hack, you see more around the fact that the Uber leadership, as at the time when this happened, were trying to hide the cyber attack more than content around what really happened. So it's good. You might spend a little time on the internet trying to find the actual hack, just so that you can understand the cyber keychain. Whenever I see a cyber breach, I'm more interested on the whole cyber attack chain, because that's how we security people can learn. I'm not because once we understand the cyber attack chain, it helps us know what went wrong, what can be done better, right? So the Uber hack also talks about engineers who pushed code to a public GitHub repository. Again, that code had credentials improperly secured that were exposed when those codes were pushed to the GitHub. One common thing that we hear here is credentials improperly stored. And so the question is, how do you store credentials? How do you ensure that credentials are stored? And how do you ensure that people are storing these credentials properly? All right. Security failures rather, they often start as governance blind spot. And what does this mean? I just told the story of reference to two cybersecurity attacks, right, that had happened, that had happened. And you can see that already begin to ask yourself, what went wrong? How was that possible? If you have a bit of experience in security, begin to ask yourself, the guys for the image, who approved for deployment to production, the guys for the repository, who allowed them to push that repository, that code to public repository, how was it set up? You begin to question yourself, how was the environment set up, right? All of this will show you that security failures are often as a result of governance being blind spotted. So our focus today is on governance for Microsoft Azure, and it will be very important that we look at how Microsoft handles its own governance and security. there are 5 ways that Microsoft, or rather 5 recommendations or process that Microsoft has recommended as which to handle governance. You can't handle governance just because, oh, we want to handle governance. So it's important to start governance from who are the team responsible for governance? And then the team will conduct a bit of research, risk assessment, discovery rather, identify the elements that are in use within the cloud infrastructure, and then they will conduct risk assessment. And then all of this will be documented for governance policies to now be defined. Remember, as the technical people, you're just a technical person. What drives you in doing what you're doing is the governance policies or the governance requirements. And then there'll be enforcement of these policies, right? There'll be enforcement of these policies that have been clearly defined based on the risk assessment that was done. And finally, you have continuous monitoring, right? So if we put these 5 blocks, right, as the foundation, so now we understand why we need to do governance, right? We need to do governance because governance is what helps us. Governance is, I call it, governance is the rule book, why security, implements that rule book, right? So for us to be able to have the rule book properly defined and specified, we need these 5 steps. Build a team, conduct your discovery assessments, document this as policies, and then have these policies enforced and monitored. Now, how do we have these policies enforced? That's what brings us into the approach. How do we approach governance in our organization? You want to delegate governance responsibility. Governance responsibility is not a one-man activity, right? It's not a one-person function. It's not a one person can do it. You will find governance enforcement spread across different functions and tools in the organization. Somebody will be responsible for access control. Somebody will be responsible for the virtual network. Somebody will be responsible for the infrastructure, setting up the infrastructure, the landing zone. So if you look at some of the topics that have gone through the meetups, right, you will see the relevance as you understand governance. So you want to delegate governance responsibility. You want to adopt an inheritance model approach. And what does this mean? When you come to governance, you don't want to say, we need to do this. We need to make sure that everybody has passwords. I'm trying to give an example. Oh, we need to make sure that every user has password. And then you leave it that password is now set individually by users. What would happen is that somebody might just forget to enforce the restriction of password. So what do? You create a policy on your identity provider that says that password should be a minimum of X length, password should have one special character, password should have uppercase and lowercase. Are you seeing that? That's what you do. So you put it at a inheritance level, because if you leave it that every time an identity administrator wants to create a user and they define the complexity of that password, you'll find that people will relax it. Now bring this in the context of cloud, right? Imagine as different cloud infrastructures are coming up, different administrators are setting their own policy at the different levels, and there's no central enforcement to password because people are now the own individual administrators at a different level, right? So if a governance requirement says that the organization should have a minimum of 8 characters, it means that you need to go to each of those entities to make sure that people are doing it. So you want to have a inheritance model where this is how we do this thing, and anything that is produced, configured, or initiated into the environment from this element automatically inherits that model. When you take governance from that perspective, then it begins to become easy. And you want to discuss enforcement specifics. You want to ask yourself, why are we doing this, right? And what type of enforcement specifics are we looking at? So for example, again, like I said, we want to do password. Why are we using 8 characters and not 3 characters? Why are we having special characters? You want to discuss some of these things. Some of these things are driven by regulation and compliance requirements. So you want to have those conversations so that you can understand the different elements at which these enforcement specifics need to happen. Then you want to have a monitor first instance approach. What does this mean? You don't want to say, oh, we're enforcing this and we don't ask ourselves, is there any implication somewhere? I remember years back, we introduced something in an organization where I worked where we called deny any, because there was the instance where people would have projects to do, get developers would come in and developers would say, it's not working. We set it up and it's not working, can't communicate. And when you ask them, what ports do you need open? They don't know. What service is your application listening? They don't know. And we're like, how can you know? We're like, it was working. We've deployed this in company A, company B. We're like, yes. In this company, we have our first layer of deny any, meaning that if you bring anything into the organization, by default on the firewall is deny any. It's not going to work. You need to be able to come and discuss your enforcement specific. You need to discuss what permissions you want, right? And then we'll now put it in a monitor mode, and either allow or block, right? So when it comes to governance, you don't want to allow people to just be able to bring in things into the system and boom, that thing can work. At the same time, you don't also want to frustrate them. So you want to allow it either in a monitor mode, audit mode, just so that at the end of the day, you can gradually transition it. You can understand the behavior. You can see what will happen. So in those kind of instances with those application people, what do? We permit there when they don't know what permissions, and I've seen it several application people might not know what ports they are listening to. What do? We open it up, they try to test the application, and then we monitor the network firewall traffic, and then we can see, okay, the application is calling port 443, the application is calling an SSL connection, a TCP connection, and then we can now lock it, create a firewall rule with that specific, and then now allow it. Right. So what that will mean is that if you imagine in that kind of organization, it will be a little extra difficult for anybody to just introduce anything in the organization that can go out, because everything is tied to deny any. We only allow what we need to allow, then we monitor. And you also want to work with a preferred block list. What does this mean? Start with a block list, like I just explained, denying any. Reason is that you don't just want to open up your environment. I don't know how, I haven't created a virtual machine in the last 2 years. I was thinking I could try one before the class, but got distracted with the kids. And I don't know who has recently created a virtual machine, but I know back in the days, when you create a virtual machine on Azure, it automatically allows port 3389, right? You would explicitly have to go and say that you cannot connect to your virtual machine over the internet. Maybe you restrict it to a particular IP or environment, but by default, that virtual machine will be accessible over the internet, right? I don't know what it is like now, if it's still like that, right? So you would rather prefer a block list, right? You just don't want when people churning things into the environment, it automatically just opens up everything, or they can do anything you want. Remember, we're speaking in the cloud now. Back then, when it was on-prem, it was easy because your IP is already locked in. Now we're on the cloud. I'm sure some of you here are in the beach, maybe taking this class. Some of you are having the nice somewhere that taking this class. Some of you maybe are even with an AirPod in your ear, stuck in traffic. If you're in a wonderful city of Lagos traffic and you're listening to this class, so imagine you being anywhere and being able to access, a corporate environment, right? And the sensitivity, and there were no restrictions, right? So we want to do, the block list approach before opening it up. Now, this number 6 I used to like it, or not I used to, I like it because it's so subtle, but has a powerful impact. And you see a lot of people don't do it because it's one of those things that people don't see it as being enforced, but it plays a very vital role when we're driving governance, defining, tagging, and naming strategy. You have cases where you come into an environment and you see loads of application and there's no sequence as to how the name. Why do you think you go to your organization and you can find a sequence with the names users are being created? The essence is that if a hacker comes into your environment, they are not going to spend time to start trying to create a sequence. They are going to just create a row kind of name just to gain access, right? So that helps from a security perspective. So imagine assets, right, in the cloud, having a named sequence, right? And if you just see something that is off in the naming convention, right, then it makes you, it creates some suspicion, right? Because hackers are not going to sit down to start understanding your naming sequence. So in driving governance, right, one of our approach recommended is to have a tagging and a naming system, because it helps you at a glance to be able to say all of these things are core banking application assets. All of these things are virtual banking application assets. All of these things are PCI DSS related. All of these things are DORA related. And then when you begin to go into defining your policies and all of that, life will be easier for you because you already have a naming convention strategy that you have used. It is putting some sense into what we do on our day-to-day life. All right. Now, can we do Azure governance without tools? No. The old school manual way still works, right? Lots of guys in. Somebody said, please, is she sharing any slide? Because I can't see anything. I am sharing. Can you see my slide, please? Okay. Olariwa, do you want to leave and join again in case it's network? If more than one person is seeing, yeah. So maybe you want to leave, rejoin. It could be network. Yep. Okay. Thank you. All right. So when we want to, so we've understood how we should handle governance. We've looked at best practice approach recommended by Microsoft. And now we want to look at the tools, and automation would always be the preferred. You don't want to manually be doing things. So I remember I just took a class where I was teaching them on identity and asset management, right? And one of the tasks was for them to create users. And like I explained to them, I told them this would be one of the easiest things you will ever do in your career, creating users. Just go and create one user. I'm yet to see an environment where, except, and that's why it will be a BAU task, creation of user, just one user. But typically you find out that things are templated, automated, right? Because life makes it easier when you automate. So you want to use automation too when it comes to driving governance in Azure. And I've categorized, governance in 3 buckets that we want to look today. So let's look at policy and compliance enforcement. We have regulatory requirements. We have policies that we need to enforce. We know regulatory requirements. So regulator will say, make sure that every service that comes into their environment is tagged, right? How do you do that? Are you going to, as a governance person, you're not going to sit down every day with the different departments that are churning on resources. You're not going to sit down with them, right? You're either going to come periodically to monitor, but how do you ensure that they are doing this? You want to use automation. How do you also, beyond even ensuring, how do you enforce it? Because sometimes when you relax things, people don't adhere to it. But how do you make sure that when they want to do it, it will say, oh, this is not in line with the policy, and then thereby forcing them. Let's take, for instance, what Purview does. I don't know how many of you are conversant with Purview and labeling. You will see that in a typical DLP strategy, what would happen is that DLP labels will be created. And after those DLP labels are created, they will be pushed out in the environment in monitor mode. And after a while, you just notice that any documents you create in your organization, if you don't put a label, it won't save, or it will allow you just email it, right? So that's typically an approach of governance where you start first by introducing the element. You start first from introducing the element, and then you now monitor it, and then you now enforce it, right? And all of that is automation. You're not going to manually sit down and be telling people, make sure that when you're creating that VM, right, you give it a naming convention, and that naming convention, oh, your VM is for a PCIDS related project, right? Okay, name it like this. You want to put these things as such that when the people start selecting those elements, the system itself does the enforcement. Moving into identity access and secret management is the same thing, right? You don't want people to come into the organizations and by default, they become admins. Now, for those of you who manage small environments, we see this kind of issues lots in small environments because one person is the global admin, one person is the security admin, one person is the IAM, one person is, and while we understand the constraints you have from a staffing perspective, whereby your organization has allowed you to be everything, we would recommend in those kind of instances, right? You do things like privilege identity management. So these are tools that are available for you to enforce governance. You will do things like just-in-time access. So while you say, okay, I know that I need all these roles, right? But I don't need it every day. I need some of them to do certain tasks because we don't have people to do them, but I don't need it every day. What you would do is to use things like PIN, right? That's another governance tool that is available. And then managing keys, certificates. If you're new in tech, I'm sure when you go to a website, you will see the padlock that is on that address that is www. For example, joyemedom.me, you say certificate there. And what that certificate is actually doing for you is that it's encrypting your traffic, right? And it is, what does encryption mean? Is making sure that your traffic is not seen in clear text, meaning that if somebody should intercept that traffic, right, the person cannot be able to read what you're sending in that traffic. except they have the key that you have used to encrypt it. Now, that means that if somebody has access to a certificate and a certificate key, right, then they can decrypt. So imagine when you're doing card transactions, right, and your card transactions can be seen in clear text, the impact of it. What gives you confidence is that whatever financial services that you're using has ensured you, that they have your services encrypted, your transactions encrypted. So those keys and certificates that the backend guys use when they are setting up this infrastructure, have you asked yourself, where is it stored? Where is it kept? How is it protected? Right? You want to also ensure that only the right people have access to it. Again, one of PCI DSS requirements will be that you encrypt, all workstations that have access to PAN data, and that you can show that only people who require access to PAN data have access to it. So you want to use a system that can allow you meet that requirement without manually worrying yourself about it. So a typical identity provider like Microsoft Azure Active Directory, which is now Entra ID, is an governance automation tool. And when you use it to put those rules and conditions, right, like usernames should passwords should have this type of character, this password complexity should be this, you cannot reuse a password that you have used in the last 5 times. Those things are ways you enforce governance without manually doing it. And then the same thing also with monitoring and compliance. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and the moderator will bring my attention if there's anyone that we need to address. All right, so moving forward, we'll look at how Microsoft security benchmarks some of these requirements, and then we'll see how they are mapped to regulation. So some of the things that drive that drive governance is regulatory requirements. So you are not going to, part of what governance is trying to govern is some of the regulatory requirements. I tell people, say, as somebody who has worked across different regions, there are certain organizations that will not do certain things if regulation was not on their neck. So, for example, if you spend time to read that Uber hack, right, you will see where years, I think it was a year after the hack has happened, the CEO was penalized and everybody was penalized because of how they tried to cover up. So the regulatory requirement for their business operation mandates them to report a hack to XYZ authority. In their case, they tried to cover it up. And part of what was stipulated in the Uber report was that, this particular CEO paid off the hackers, and tried to cover up that payment as a bounty payment. So you see why they always tell you that don't believe everything you see online. So when some people tell you I want a bounty hunt, you want to find out, did they really win a bounty hunt or were they getting paid for a ransom? Just, throwing a bit of humor there. But hey, in the case of Uber, that was what they did. They tried to disguise the payment of the ransom for the attack as a bounty and payment. And so because he has breached the regulatory requirement, he was sanctioned for it. So my point is regulatory requirements, right, drive governance too for us. And so we just look at some that will help us now narrow down to the tool we'll be looking at. So let's look at, we have one called encrypt, sensitive data in transit. This is a requirement that you'll find that is under NIST, under PCI DSS, under the security information standard. We also have used a secure key management process. We also have used a secure certificate management process. We also have ensure security of key and certificate process. So if you see this kind of requirements, what does it tell you? So if you're in your organization, right, and you are doing stuff that require you to have keys and require you to have certificates, and you just save them anywhere and think, what's my own? I just want to secure my web traffic. I just want to secure, right? Because you don't understand how it ties to the regulatory requirement. Then the organization needs to now come to say, how can they make sure that, because they are different line of business doing certain different things, we need to make sure that they adhere. And that's where things like the Azure Key Vault, which is a tool we'll be looking at today, would help any organization that currently is leveraging on the Microsoft Azure to drive its cloud services. You will now see how you can use the Azure Key Vault to meet some of these regulatory requirements. So you have certificates, you need encryption in transit, encryption at rest, you need secrets and secret keys, and regulation requires you to provide these requirements. So when the regulator comes, for example, they're going to throw these requirements at you, and they want to see how you're doing it. So if you set up Azure Key Vault, then you'll be able to meet these regulatory requirements, and in some instance, leverage Azure policy on top of Azure Key Vault to be able to meet this. So what is Azure Key Vault? Now we've understood governance. Now we're landing into what governance is going to do for us. So we started first of all to even understand why governance. And we saw several, we looked at 2 use cases, cyber incidents that have happened, and how, because the absence of governance around it, those incidents and the impact. We went ahead to understand the approach that Microsoft recommends for us if we wanted to handle governance in our organization. Now we know that you can't do governance without automation. While you can manually check things, follow up with people, write emails, right? It can be stressful, especially with the rapid rate at which cloud adoption.
Oh, hey,
So you see, one way we can ensure governance when people join meetings is that we can put a setting that says that when people join meetings, they're automatically muted. And that can drive governance for us in our meetings. All right. So and now we understand that for us to implement this, we need tools for automation, and we've looked at a couple of tools. So because we want to now focus on Azure Vault, which is one of the tools that handles this type of requirements that need to be governed, right? We need to also understand what is even this Azure Vault. So if you are somebody who says, I want to build a skill set in GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. So I see a lot of people online. I think my pathway is GRC. And I'm like, okay, GRC where? You could take one element of GRC and you could now even come to understand, okay, let me see how GRC is implemented, in Azure, and I want to focus on maybe NIST requirements. And when you take those requirements, you want to see which of the Microsoft Azure tools, right, would help an organization make sure that they meet up with these requirements. And that's how you can build your learning, because now you will understand that. So if I go to an environment and I'm trying to make sure that they're not just with a old school checklist, are you doing this? I'll begin to ask them things like, okay, do you have a keyword management system that you're using to do this? And blah, 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 blah. So that's how you can skill up, even if you're not going to know how to implement this, but now you can understand that, oh, these are the tools that are available in this cloud infrastructure that organizations can use to match this requirement that governance expects from them. So the Azure Key Management Service, it offers several options. You would see things like the Azure Managed HSM. And HSM, I can't remember what the full meaning, but I know it has to do with hardware token. So for those of you who have hardware tokens, right, in your organizations, those hardware tokens are stored. The system that manages those tokens are stored in a system that is called a HSM, and you need to manage access to all of that. So Azure helps you with its own HSM and also helps you manage your own HSM. Especially you see HSM scenarios mainly for card related services. So I know that in the banking industry, almost every bank had HSM because they have card systems. And so that's where the key that was used to encrypt the bank and the card transaction, without going into much detail. Thank you very much. Yeah, hardware security model is done. So Azure has one of those services for you. And then you now have the Azure Key Vault, which is one of the most basic functionalities that can help you provide simple security measures in your organization on how you handle secrets and keys. And then the Azure Key Vault, which is our focus, we'll be looking at 2 types of things. Your vault for managing secrets, keys, certificates. And again, Azure Key Vault can also still help you to manage security modules around the manage HSM. The Key Vault is a cloud service. Everything we're talking about today, cloud. Nothing is on-prem. Everything is on the cloud now. Kudos to those of you who are learning tech in this era. Life is easier for you. You're not worrying about server, worrying about network cable. You just come in chunk of something and the thing spawns up, right? Back in the days, it means that somebody would have been responsible for building the hardware that will have the capability to do this vault management. But today, boom, just by logging into your portal.azure, you'll be able to, set up a key vault system, which we'll demo here today. So 3 key things that the Azure Key Vault helps you manage is certificate, secret, and keys. So if you don't leave here with anything today and you work in an organization where you know that certificates are stored on direct servers, secret keys are stored in notepads, keys are generated from different systems, nobody can come to say, just talking about it, I remember vividly how many times internet banking will go off in some organizations, and you'll be amazed at why certificate has expired. Nothing was tracking the certificate, and whoever was tracking it has probably resigned and left. And now it's time to renew. Boom, certificate, nobody remembered. So who was going to tell them that certificate has expired? And most times, always the customers that will find it, because they will now call the marketers to say, "Oh, I'm trying to use your internet banking, it's throwing up an error." Customer marketer will check, or relationship manager, or whatever they're called, and will now raise a ticket with IT. By that time, they've called the CIO. Everybody is throwing tantrums. How did it happen? When you sit down to investigate it, no centralized management and visibility into this, right? I've seen cases too where certificates are generated for a particular integration, and then something needs to connect to that thing and says, "Can you share your certificate with us?" Boom, somebody, right clicks, goes to Google, saves the certificate and shares. And the person is like, "No, I'm not connecting with you. I need you to give me your keys." I'm like, "Where is the key?" I don't know where the key is. I just went on the server and I saw it, right? Somebody has probably known that, oh, we need to protect keys, so save the key somewhere and passworded the key, but now nobody knows where the key, even the person can't remember again where they kept the key. No documentation was done. You can see the amount of hassle. Now, if we go back to the Uber hack and the Codvo hack, right? It's, you need, as a developer, you are setting up your app that needs to connect. One app needs to connect to another endpoint, right? And you need to use certain connection strings, and you want to encrypt those connection strings, right? So in that connection that you're encrypting with certificates, you put the certificate embedded with the connection, right? And the keys. How do you protect that? Because then if somebody has that config file, then they can get the certificate and the key. So you want that developer's connection, when he wants to decrypt and encrypt it, you should connect to your vault and pick up the keys, and the certificate, and do the encryption and return back, right? So when you play out all these scenarios that are our everyday day-to-day life, the application guy is doing his own thing, man. He has his own KPI. He can't be bothered about security. He knows his job very well. He knows that he needs to use a certificate. So he's doing development by design, some of these buzzwords that we use. But then, he has developed, he has put encryption, he has put certificates. For him, he's adhering to security. But security is, keys are kept where we don't know, certificates are kept where we don't know, and then boom, there's an incident where Lion Health Aspect are trying to trace how did this attack happen, right? Boom, we now find out that, oh, certificate was saved on a server. In my early career days, I used to be very passionate about forensic and investigation. Marriage and children took away that energy from me, because it can be time consuming and mentally, because you need to read a lot. But then I used to conduct certain investigations on fraud, and one of the incidents I've handled, while it could be established that the hacker exploited a particular endpoint to come in, every other thing the hacker did in the environment was not an attack. I'm sorry, it was not the attacker did not exploit. It was pure easy access. Why? Because luckily for him, the first endpoint he landed, an administrator has left a notepad with username, passwords, everything there, right? So easy peasy. He didn't have to hack his way around stuff. So we'll be looking at how Azure Key Vault helps us, as an organization, to store these API keys. You set up an API. You for example, a developer says we need to do email integration, right? And he goes to the marketplace and he downloads SendGrid, and then he uses SendGrid, and then SendGrid require API. He creates it and then copies the API and saves on his notepad on his laptop. Tomorrow a system is compromised. Those are all the things that the hacker takes. So that's why you see that we keep saying this thing in tech, where in security, where we say there are 3 types of people: people that have already been hacked, people that know that people that already been hacked and they know, people that would soon be hacked, and people that have been hacked and don't know that they've been hacked. Because there are many things that hackers can take from you that they're not using today, but you don't know. And then by the time they use it, it's confusing to you how they're just pieces and pieces of fingerprints that you've left, hanging around. So Azure Key Vault will help us securely store these API keys, these passwords, these certificates, these cryptographic keys, and a developer can use it. So a developer can connect to the Azure Key Vault using what we call the URI keys. So there'll be a URI that you now share with your developer, whereby in their code, where they're supposed to now typically input their certificate, put all of these things, they will just be putting the URI keys, telling us that when you need to take a key, just go straight to this vault. And that's where you see access control and the rest. And then you, as a security administrator, you can utilize the vault, for logging your keys. You now don't have to log your keys in your notepad. You don't have to log your keys in your Excel. You don't have to log your keys in your personal password manager, right? All located on your local system, or some people put it on the file server, and we all know file server is one of the most compromised assets in organizations, but many organizations don't know. Now, I'll quickly do a run through, here explaining some of these functionalities, and then I'll switch to a live environment for us to now look through the features. So one of the key features that we'll see in an Azure Key Vault would be the access control, right? You want to say who has access to this. So the good thing is that you would have saved that thing in your notepad, right, and keep on your system. And while you are like, it's my system, nobody has access to it. One, your system could be compromised. Two, you could share your system with somebody, and for some weird reason, the person just dabbles on it, right? So you want to use a system that allows you to have an access control, where you can determine who needs to do what. Does somebody want a reader access? Does somebody want access to be able to edit? And I just give example now how certificates can expire, and you want a new certificate. You want to do things like rotation. Can you rotate the keys so that when it's time to expire, it will generate a new key, or you don't have to worry about creating a new key? It will generate it, and then somebody can come in there, copy, and use it in whatever platforms that they have. And the good thing is there will now be audit trail, right? So it's not a case of I don't know who has access to it, right? We can, you imagine saving a certificate and a key on a server, and so many people have access to it, and begin to worry, oh, the log is showing that Joy logged into this server, and Joy is saying, but I didn't do anything in that key folder, versus the log is showing that Joy connected to the key vault, right? And she copied out a key value, or she connected to the key vault and she saved the key value. So those kind of things. So those are the benefits of using the key vault, where we can use the access control, identity and access management. Another interesting configuration available here is also access control, where you can put role based. So you can just beyond just saying, oh, people can connect access, you can say what role do you want. I've explained that, whether you want read access. There are 2 ways you can do access control. You can use access control from policy. So the policy can say that nobody should be able to connect to the vault if they are not on VPN. For example, nobody should be able to connect to the vault if they're not on this, or you want to just tie it to roles, right? Microsoft recommends to use more of role-based access control, and then you can leverage conditional access policy for other things rather than use access policy. So how do we configure a key vault access control? This is where my slide malfunctioned. Some of my pages have gone in and out, right? So different kind of, when I move into the live environment, you will see the different types of access you can give a vault, whether I can have grant, read, generate, the different types of permissions that you can give an access vault. Just speed up a bit. And then Microsoft has built-in Azure Key Vault roles, right? Now, if you're not familiar with roles, if you go to Microsoft Entra, you will see lots of roles that Microsoft has already created, and you can customize your roles. You can click on that role, and you can go through what that role can do, and then you can customize it. So we're not doing role class here today, but then if you're familiar with Microsoft roles, you'll be able to see the things you can do with the roles. All right, permission, I've had the child intrusion. All right, so some of the roles that you can use to assign access to your key vaults. Microsoft already has them. You see them key vault there. These roles will tell you what you can do. And so in your organizations, you can define who needs to do what. So where people will be restricted and say, I don't need to come to identity team anytime I want access to this system. Boss, I've seen those kind of scenario play out where when you want to introduce a security element, especially application people, they'll tell you how it's going to slow down. Now, there's nothing like slow down. You can give them certain access, right? But what you know is that from a governance perspective, all keys, all secrets are saved here. And then they can go in at their own time. They don't need to come to you guys to get access to it, right? But you can now say that you have brought in some level of governance around key management. I like this configuration in the key vault because this helps you in the world of cloud where, like I said, somebody can be anywhere. We saw one of the intrusion where somebody connected to our call now while walking on the street. So people could choose to be anywhere and connect to company infrastructure, right? So you want to use the network settings to do certain restriction. For example, you want to say that nobody can connect to this vault when they're outside the company network. And so what that gives you assurance is that if a hacker compromises, the hacker needs to be within the network. Or if somebody wants to be malicious, the person needs to be within the network. Now, taking into consideration that the network will have other security controls, but it just helps you not to leave this open-ended versus anybody can connect to this vault if they're on the internet. So you want to think that if, for example, someone does a social engineering on me and the person is able to compromise my account, the person can connect to this vault from whatever country they're in, versus if we restrict it to the internal network, what it will mean is that if my account has been compromised, it means that the person needs to be in our internal network. So either they're using our VPN, are you seeing it, or they are literally in one of the office buildings. So this is how you can layer in conditional access policy, layer in named location, layer in all of these things to bring that security and value to this. So I really like this setting and configuration. All right, so we would, at this point, instead of going through, I would stop sharing and then log in straight into Azure so that we can see a live scenario. While I'm doing that, do we have any questions, please? Let me know when you can. I can't see the chat, so moderator, I'm going to rely on you in this instance, because in this particular method of sharing, I can't, I won't be able to see.
Okay. Okay, ma'am.
Just in case, yeah, anybody. All right, so can you guys see my screen? It's showing Azure services.
Yeah, I can see your screen from my end.
Okay. Now, before I go on, I'll give a scenario because I know that there was a class that was held with this scenario. I feel like if we go and relate, if we watch that class, then we relate. So how many of us are conversant with I'll go back here before so I can see some chat. How many of us are conversant with using enterprise apps and app registration in Azure? So I'll give a typical scenario. In the last 6 months, there's been a lot of demand around this in the industry. Again, because of cloud apps and cloud applications lots of third-party applications are coming up, and organizations want to centralize it. So you're having to integrate identity provider. So let's focus on Microsoft here, integrating their identity provider, which is Microsoft Entra, with that application, so that there'll be like single sign-on, and then sitting on top of single sign-on, you have lots of security controls. Now, if you wanted to integrate single sign-on to third-party apps, depending on the type of authentication protocol you'll be using, you'll find yourself using a certificate or a secret key. Like I said, I personally have done 100 and almost hitting 120 in the last 6 months for across organizations. It's in high demand. And for those of you who like freelance, if you want to challenge me, go into Upworks and just search, and you'll see loads and loads of this on Upwork. So it's one way you can get free change to support you once you know how to integrate Microsoft Entra to third-party apps. But when you need to use especially the OIDC protocol, you will need to generate secret keys. And the question is, where are people keeping these keys? Where are they saving the keys? Notepads. Except the organization has a key management system, and key management system is really an expensive infrastructure to set up, whether cloud or non-cloud, right? So if an organization has not really seen a need for a proper end-to-end key management system, which, like I said, most times you find it in people who do lots of encryption and decryption, a simple key vault is a easy way for them to put that security control and governance back into the organization and embed in it all the identity access control. So bearing in mind that use case where you're an organization or you're a security resource, whether you sit in the IM, whether you sit in infrastructure, whether you sit in SOC, but you are aware of lots of, integrations now happening to third-party apps where the organization wants everybody to be able to use one identity, so that, again, from a governance perspective, that's what governance is driving now with the use of third-party apps. Marketing comes and says, oh, we want to use Canva, we want to use Creative AI. It will make us, when we create our content, the company's sales will skyrocket from 0 to 100,000. And so they get their approval, they go get their approval, they don't involve IT, boom, the approval is gotten, they reach their partner creates a tenant for them, and they have access to this. They create username and passwords for themselves, and they are logging in. You come into innovation team say we want to manage our mural boards, so we want Miro, and so that way we can, visualize our boards and connect it to blah blah blah. We also want to network safe. We don't mind using your Miro application to, plug in our designs, our network points. Boom, they create a profile. So what you're typically seeing happening recent time in organization is lots of third-party applications spawning up, right? Because we don't want to hamper productivity, and third-party apps are now everywhere. Makes life easy. They don't need to come to IT to get approval, they get it. So what IT is doing is bringing back, working with governance, risk, and saying, let's centralize identity. Let's know that you don't have 20 applications and have to worry about 20 passwords and have to worry about 20 platforms adhering to the right password control, password restriction. So what do? If you integrate it with Entra, then sitting on top of that, it will inherit the Entra. Remember when we talked about the inheritance model? It will inherit the Entra policy around password complexity, password usage, password rotation. It would also inherit conditional access policy around whether MFA should prompt or MFA should not prompt. It will inherit the conditional access policy around whether you can log in from outside corporate locations or not. Are you seeing the benefits of it? So, but for whoever is responsible for doing that integration to do it, in most cases, depending on the authentication protocol for that application, they would find themselves generating lots of secrets and certificates, either to do token encryptions or to, do the secret token encryption using secrets or certificate. So in that instance, where are they storing it? So taking that, we're going to now go back to Key Vault, where bear in mind that you've seen this scenario, and then you now need to preach the message of let's use a Key Vault. So when you come to Azure, just type in Key Vault. That's it. You will see the Key Vault here where you can create. one of the most easiest implementation anybody can do. But the work is in the design, right? But here, because we're not in a design session, we'll just be talking through most of the things. But typically, this is it. You see the key vault, and all you need to do is just click on create, and that's it. Now, one key thing that the key vault wants you to do is that the key vault wants you to place itself in a resource group. And this is, I like this. This is Microsoft doing their own governance at their own way. And the good thing for this is a resource group will help you to be able to apply certain tags and control. So for example, PCI DSS, I know that there is one of their requirements that talks around when you want to do PCI DSS, it will say anything in scope, anything PCI DSS, you have to first of all define it. Anything anything card related, you need to define it as what is in scope before you commence your PCI DSS requirement. So imagine you have card related applications that have been identified. You probably want to group them as one key vault. Maybe you have this team that does card relation, and so you want to say everything around their key certificates. I want to put it in one particular vault, and so you want to keep it in one particular resource group that is different from the other ones that they use. So at this point, you will have to, create a new resource group before you proceed, right? Now imagine just putting test here. While that's okay for this demo, in a real life organization, right? Imagine that you're leaving everybody to decide what the resource groups or what naming conventions to use. And that's where that number 6 approach that Microsoft recommends, we have a naming strategy, tagging strategy. But for the purpose of this, we will just use demo test. Resource group. Now, the same thing with subscription. If you are in an environment that's multi-subscription, you also want to say, where do I want to keep my keywords? I've seen organizations where they have a subscription for user identity and all that. Then they have a subscription strictly for sensitive assets, right? And so the users down that subscription have a different login details and all that. So that's why I said that when it comes to design, it's a different thing, but we're just going to look through the overview of the solution. But typical thing would be to sit down and do the architecture and design of what is related or required in your environment so that the setting up makes sense. And that's why you have things like the option of you can select multiple subscriptions if you have, and then you select the the resource group, or you create one. And then what's the key vault name? I'm just going to call it payment team vault. Okay, what region? Again, I'm sure that if you've done Microsoft Azure courses, you understand why you need to know where to keep your resources. So for example, if your resource group is in location A, it doesn't make sense taking your key vault to location B, just for latency, neatness, organization. I just use something close to Europe. Let's use this, right? Now the pricing tier, again, this is where you need to pay attention. As an organization, you want to make sure that you adhere to whatever pricing model, right? Again, the standard one is fine. If you're not doing anything HSM, don't incur extra costs for your organization. And then soft delete. What does soft delete mean? You can actually delete off a record here, but it really does not get deleted until after 90 days. So for those of you who are familiar with Active Directory, you know that you can delete an account on Active Directory, but it's really not deleted until after 90 days. That's why if you delete an account now and you want to recreate that account, so you want to recreate an account using that exact same name, you see that it doesn't go because that account that you deleted is still in the system. It's just a soft delete. And before it actually purges it out. So the soft delete is enabled by default, and days to retain, and the default is 90. Again, you can increase this based on whatever is your organization retention period. So as an architect and design, what we do is, while we will say somebody is going to implement the key vault, we would have sat down to design what all of these decisions is and get approval. So from a governance perspective, the governance people will come to say the regulatory requirement says that we should keep logs for, I'm just giving an example, 5 days that is related to keychains, right? So at that point, you want to adhere to that and put this here. purge protection. You want to disable purge, which is you want to allow key vaults and objects to be purged during retention period, or you want to allow enable purge period, enforce a mandatory retention period for deleted vaults, right? Again, this is where you enforce things or put certain hierarchy model configuration that either will impact everybody or the individual that is creating it. And that's it. Boom. We have a key vault created, guys. Like I said, one of the easiest implementation you ever do as a security person. So if you're not using key vaults in your organization now, meanwhile you are aware that lots of keys are being generated and certificates, please guys go and get your organization to maximize their Azure investments and and be safe. I'm happy to have extra conversation with anybody that needs more delivery, but that's it. We have our key vault. Now, how do we customize what we have? So we're going to go to the resource. And this is our key vault, right? First thing, I'll play with this overview page. What can you do here? You can delete your key vault. Remember, we've talked about what the deletion will mean. The deletion will mean that it's in a soft delete state, right? Are you seeing that? And we can see the location where it is. We can see the resource group that is there. You can move it away from this resource group if you want. And then here, this is an important value. This is what you give your developer. So if you're going to put a key here that a developer will need, this would be your URI to the vaults that you can use. We can add tags, right? If you have a tagging system for certain things, again, you can call it, maybe if this vault is for PCI DSS, then we can choose to call it the PCI DSS, this kind of thing, you put the organization name of PCI DSS. Okay, and then that's it. You can add tagging, and that's a tag that can tell us. And then we move to activity logs. Well, nothing has really happened here, so there's nothing much to see. We come to access control, right? Access control. How do you grant access to here? So you can see who has access. You can see the different role and assignments that have been assigned. You can see roles that exist. So there are different roles that are here, what people can do in these roles. Who has access to these roles, whether containers, whether the applications. So in this vault, you can say, I want containers in payment systems, right, to have access to this vault. I want everybody to be able to have access to the vault. So Microsoft already has default roles that you can use, right? And you can now configure what you need. So how do you do that? You can come and say, I want to add a role assignment, and I want to add a reader role. And who am I adding it to? You can add again group, user, service principal. I'm sure many of you are aware with what the service principal is, what we used to call those days service accounts, right? Yeah, what the new terminology for them are non-human identities, right? They're not owned by a human being. You can't say this is a Joy account, is an account used by service, right? So maybe in the payment platform, there's a service account that they use to maybe pull bad jobs from the card system at the end of every day, and then process it and then generate a export that they use to send for the creation of card requests. So imagine a bank where every day people come in and say, I want to request for an ATM card and all of that. Well, now there's instant card. I think I need to learn how to face reality and debunk some of these our old life. So back in the days when the old life, when you would go to the bank, right, they'll give you a form to request for ATM card, and then you will go and come back. What typically happens is that there's a portal that they fill your request, and at the end of the day, there's a bad job that will run and take that request and create it as an output file that they now send to the secure card production company. But today we have lots of instant card that doesn't have to deal with that. So I'm sure what the instant card will do at the end of the day is run that job at the end of the day and synchronize with the system, because your cards have already been generated. But that's just one example. Another example can be a service account that goes to pull a record from an API database or something that it uses to populate itself. But my point is, if you have your developers having the need to use API service accounts, right, you can grant that service account access to the vault, or you grant the user access. And so in this instance, I'll just take a test user that I have. And then this role is, once you click, is a funny, here is very funny. You can see it's not really clicking past. If you just highlight it, then that's already the clicking. So you can choose whatever function, right, that you want to give that access, that you want to give to that account, right? And then that's it. You review. An account. So in this instance, this is a user human account that I have granted the reader rights. So when you come to role assignments, you can see. So I've granted this on this vault. I have said this user can read information in this vault. So you can define a user access model for vault system in your organization, right? And use that to now populate whatever. Moving on, we come to the objects where we do the actual work. So you can see we have keys, we have secrets, we have certificates. Before I go on, you can see so it's not yet in picking up. My permission is telling me, but that will clear after a while. You can see wait for a few minutes. But now let's say we want to generate keys. What are keys? So I will navigate to application. Let me navigate here and show you how we get a key. So in this instance, I will simulate that we created a OIDC account, and that OIDC account has a secret key. So typically when you come to enterprise application, I know we had a course on this. So if you can check one of the, I don't know if it was 2 classes away, somebody taught around enterprise application, setting up enterprise application. I watched that, and by the way, that was a good delivery. So let's take, for example, this application, right? This is a Splunk application that has been integrated to Entra. So what this means is that instead of people to use their local username and password to log into Splunk, they'll now be using their Entra identity. And you can see here, they've set up, okay, permission. You won't get the keys from the enterprise administration, so you get it from app registration. I always make this mistake all the time. I don't know how many people do it, but I do. Okay, where's my app registration? Right. Hey guys, sometimes Entra can be, I'll just come through here. Yep. Thank you. All right. So again, if this is new for you, please don't get it all muddled up. I'm just trying to first of all show you scenarios where you can generate key. There are tons and tons of classes on how to learn how to use Microsoft Entra to integrate with applications that will create this scenario. So in this instance, I've set up a Splunk account, and if you come here to the app registration, managed secret certificate and keys, you will see I have a key value here. So I can decide to create a new one and then just call it whatever, how many days I want. So typically what will happen is you see people do this, and then once they get the key, I see it. Now look at, there's a warning. Oh God, I think I missed it. There's a warning. Let me see if it will show. It's very important. It helps you understand why you need to save this somewhere. Let's see if that one is not showing. So there's a warning that tells you, you see this key. If you don't, the moment you copy it, you can't see it again. It's gone. So I was looking, there's a place Microsoft notifies you. So when you create a secret, the moment I say copy now, that's it. It won't, you can see it becomes encrypted like this. I will never be able to get it. So that's why you will find people always save it in a notepad. Because somebody will say that, no, now people can always come back and you can't come back and copy it. So again, this reiterates the importance of a key vault. So let's take that. I come here and I take this one, I copy it, then I go back here to my secrets and I say I want to generate a secret manual. What do I want to call it? So for consistency, I might want to call it test, just so that. And then what's the value? I place the value there. So if you put the C sign and you go back here, you can see it's the same thing. And if you come back here, that's it. So it will ask you content type optional, set activation date. Do you want to set an activation date where you want to activate it? And for me, it's deactivated. So maybe you want to align it with this date here. Okay, it's the expiring date that is here. So it's expiring on the 21st of June, 2027. So we'll come back here and we say set expiring date. That's it. Is it enabled now? Are you enabling it now? Yes. Do you want to give a tag? Maybe you want to give the same tag, PCI addresses. And that's it, you have created your key. Since the operation is not allowed by rollback. Okay. All right. It's not allowing me, so let's go back. I have to give myself access. I don't know why. I'm going to give myself owner. Let's come back here. Yep. I don't know what's happening here. 1 minute it says I have access, it goes off. Okay. Okay, while this is finding its brain, why it's deciding whether I have access, I'll just go to the one that I have previously created. Yeah, and just create it here. Yep. All right. Okay, so you can see that I have added that secret here. So what does this mean for an organization? It means that people don't have to save secret values on their notepad anymore, right? And then you can come here and save it and grant access control. So what would typically happen is if Emmanuel, for example, works in the department that I have just done this integration for, and Emmanuel needs access to the secret key, right? I don't need to chat Emmanuel that I have finished the configuration of integrating your application in Entra. This is the secret key. All I'll do is that I would grant Emmanuel access here and maybe give him a reader role. And that's it. When he goes to portal.azure and logs in, he would be able to go into the key vault and see his key and retrieve it. Any questions, please? And
Yes,
that same
good.
for, okay, yes, please go ahead. Question. Yeah.
Thanks for the class. So
Okay, sir,
just
can I
a
go ahead?
quick one.
Okay, sir.
Moderator, who is going first, please?
Let me allow the lady.
All right. Thank you, you're such a gentleman.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I wanted to so I wanted to ask, so when you give the staff, let's say of the department, the reader role to see the secrets, will he be able to see other secrets of other departments, or that can also be done on our back? Because I know when you shared the certificate and secret, I could see like other secrets there. So is there a way to implement our back on that particular secret?
Okay,
Or will
so
you just see
that's
all
where,
the certificates?
okay, all right. So your question is, if I have multiple secrets, right, but different administrator or different users who need access to it, right, how do I ensure that people do not see the secrets of others?
Exactly. Yes, that's my question.
Good. So that's where the design comes in. You need to sit down and understand your organization, how who needs what and how needs what. That's how you define your resource group. So that's why if you check, first of all, there's a resource group, then there's the vault. So the RBAC is done on the vault. So if the guys in payment departments have several scenarios that require me, then what do? I will create a vault for payments, knowing fully well that everybody in the team, right? They're in the team. So they typically will have it versus just creating access to just the secret. So I think the concept of the RBAC is on the vault, not on the entity, because most times you find that your jobs are in groups, either in department or a line of business project. So typically everybody in that project or in that department would have had access to that information. So the RBAC is done on the vault. So it's not, people can have different access level on the vault, but it doesn't mean that they can restrict it. So I can be an administrator whereby I can create new ones, or I can edit, or I can be a reader. So if you don't want people to see other people's secret, then don't do the grouping. Just say, oh, I have one vault, and inside that vault, I'm putting everybody's secrets and certificates. No, that's not security too, right? Remember, even at the vault level, you want to do the RBAC. So it's define what type of, how many vaults do I need? What are the vaults for? Am I going to categorize the vaults per department, or per support, or per projects? Because that way I can know that if I give the roles or access to these people, it's okay if they see the other keys and secrets and certificates within that vault, because typically they use all of them. So again, I'm just looking at the dynamics of organizations. A team that is responsible for card related services, that team, you'll find out that they all have access to the PAN card server. It's just that some people might be interns, some people might be analysts, but they all have access to that department. So I might have just one vote for them and give different roles. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Sure. You're welcome. The gentleman.
All right. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, so my question, I just wanted to confirm. I know for the after generating, I mean, during the generation of a key secret value, the recommendation is usually 6 months. So just want to ask if there is any, especially from a security point of view, because I saw, even though this is just for a test, you shows 2 years. So does that really matter? And then secondly, because I generate keys for, I would say, developers who are external bodies. They are not registered on our tenants. So when I saw the URI earlier somewhere, I was happy that maybe one could just send that as a link for them to, but I don't know if that is something that works or not. But because what I do at the moment is that I copy out on just having as text for both values and ID, and then I send that. Yeah, under overview, yes, exactly.
Yeah, so what would typically
But this is
happen
the
is it
entire
depends.
vault.
Yes. Again, for example, if your scenario is different projects, different developers, right? So I typically would use email to send it to them. If they don't have any access to your tenant, which is your tenant is not exposed to external people. You don't have external access configurations where you give certain, you can create external access on your tenants, right? Where they can still access your vault, but as external users. Now, if that's not the case, and you might not get approval to do that, right? So you still do that, but then you save it, because when you have shared it with them, where do you keep it? So you send it via email to them, that's fine, because they don't have external access to you, but where do you yourself keep? But remember, if they're setting up an infrastructure for you, right, then the access to the vault is not for them as an external, right? It's that entity. So are they setting up that your company application on your company's Azure, or are they setting it on an AWS, and then there needs to be a connection? So at that point, you need to create a security principle for them, or a managed identity. Are you getting it? Then grant that access. So when you give them the vault URL, that will be what they'll use as the login, not them as a user, because they're not really the ones trying to log into the vault. They want to give their application or anything access to the key.
Yeah. Okay. So the URI here is it open to anybody, or you need access to, like login credentials?
So this is a service that can be consumed with an identity.
Okay.
Right. So
Okay.
in this instance, it can be a security principle. So if you come here, for example, and say member, you can see it can be a service principle, it can be a user, it can be a group, it can be a managed identity. You know that the managed identity and the service people are not human being accounts.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm saying that if I had to design for your organization, what I would first of all do is ask that these developers, what are they using? This, when they need this secret key, they're not using it for them. It's not like they need to put it in their application, in their code. Remember, they're putting it in their code. Yes, they're putting it in their code. So they're telling their code that connect to this application. So you have set up an application on your environment, right? And on that your application, remember you did this, you set up an application here, and you told your application here that anytime anybody is trying to connect to it for token validation or whatever, whether it's API permission, it should use this key, right, to decrypt the connection. Are you seeing it? So it means that on this guy, right, I will want some authentication. So I will come here and not here, sorry, it would be in the, so the app registration version is here, but for the access, it will be on the enterprise application side. And I will add that service principle. So the first thing is create a service principle. A service principle is what we used to call service account, or a managed identity, depending on how you want to design it. Grant that access on the version, on the enterprise version of the application. You create the secret key on the app registration version. Then on the enterprise version, add the service principle, because you will see it there. Here, this is enterprise version. When you come here and go to users and groups, you can see that you can add users, right? So it says that this account has access to this application, but then you want it to consume the vault, then you come back here and also add it here to that vault. I don't have a service principal, all I have is user account. And you see in your directory, in this tenant, I only have these two accounts. You will see whatever you search it, you add it here, and then you give it whatever role you want that principal to be, which is maybe read, or if it's a read role, you see keyword read metadata of keywords and the certificates, or perform actions, or you find whatever of these roles, right, aligns with what you want it to be. And that's it. So you could do a test on yourself, right, where you could tell one of the developers, I want to try something, create a service principle, give it to them, and then you troubleshoot but that's typically the off my head design that I see, rather than, yes, if you don't want to give it to them, Claire, that's fine, because they're not really, it's not for their own consumption, they're going to put it in the application. So why not tell the application to connect straight to Entra and get it, rather than them typing it one way? So that's how you avoid secrets being compromised. Now, their application, again, is dependent on if the application can do that kind of connection. If they say the application cannot, which most times it can. It's just that maybe the developer doesn't know. Then there's nothing you can do. You have to send it to them as email. But you on your end, where do you save it? Do you save it on your notepad? Come here and vault it, just so that if somebody needs it tomorrow and for another instance or anything, you know where to get it, rather than a notepad of access.
Yes, thanks. So I've not been using key vault, but with this we'll begin utilization. So for the validity of the secret value, recommendation is usually 6 months. So yeah.
Use whatever works for you. Again, you balance security with organizations, right? If you know that you have a system where, and that will bring us to rotation. Will I see that? Let me check. See. Find where that thing is. Trying to look for the place for rotation. You can tell it to, I think it's under keys. I'm looking for, I can't find it, but that's fine. You can, yes, you can, if your organization is fine with 6 months, that's good. So, but what that means is that every 6 months you need to regenerate a key and do the same process. And if that's okay with your organization, then that's fine. To be
All
honest,
right.
yeah. I personally, I use 2 years, but it's clearly defined. So that's why I said that you need to define these things, have it approved and clear. So most organizations I've worked with would prefer within a 2-year time frame that they. That's why we always prefer certificates than secret key, because secret key can be so static. With certificates, you can now configure rotations, and then it will auto renew and rotate by itself, and you don't have to worry about that.
Oh, okay. Are you referring to SSL certificates?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Any other questions, please? All right. Looking at time, can you guys give me like another 10 minutes to just quickly run through the other functionalities on this page? Would that be okay to ask for?
Yeah, please go ahead and do so, man. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm happy to even see, like I said, anytime I teach, even if it's one person that goes away with a new knowledge, it's exciting. So I'm already feeling fulfilled to know that there's somebody here who, just by virtue of this session, has gotten, an insight on how to introduce a new value into the organization. I know that there are other people, maybe they're not coming off the mic, but that's, it just means that what we're doing in the MCT Nigeria Forum is what, everybody's time to see how we can help you improve in what you're doing on your organization. And that's the same thing even with certificates, right? Now, the good thing with certificates is the key vault is that you can use the key vault to generate certificates too on its own, right? Here in this instance is if you have certificate that is issued by a CA that you've connected, but you can use this to also generate certificates. In this instance, you want to connect Azure to your certificate authority. If you're an organization that set up a PKCI system on your Azure, then you can do this. Again, like I said, you can't know. Microsoft is putting all these opportunities there. So as you expand in your security architecture and design, it's saying don't lock yourself and say, oh, because in the on-prem world, all of these things were there. In the cloud, we cannot do it. No, we can do it now. So you can connect here to your certificate authority because I hope you know that some organizations prefer to sign their certificates for their internal applications. So they invest in a PKCS, in a public key certificate infrastructure, right? Back in the days, we used to have the Microsoft one, right? And I don't know, and then I know that Entrust used to have one. So if that's the case, you can set it up. So if an organization, if your internal applications, right, are saying that we want certificates, right, you can come here and do a generate. And the moment it generates it, you don't have to, which is typically what used to happen. People will generate certificates and again save it on the server, share it, via email, and those certificates have binded with them keys that do the decryption, so you can use it. So the two values the certificate side does for you here is that you can see that it will now manage it. So if it expires, so you can go to notifications and configure it to notify people so that if it expires, we're not having service break. People are now being notified. So this is alert and monitoring. People are now being notified, when certificate is going to expire, key is going to expire, and they can now fix it, request for renewal. So like Amos, who does 6 months, Amos can now configure, because yes, he's doing 6 months. 6 months looks short, but how many will he remember? So most times what you will find with Amos is maybe the application will break, then the application people will come to him and he'll say, okay, I need to generate a new secret for you. But Amos can optimize, and introduce governance here where why he's now going to move into Key Vault. Remember, he was using Notepad before or sending it via email. He'll move into Key Vault. Then he will configure the expiration date. So now Azure is aware. Then he will come here and create his alert rule that will trigger maybe 1 week to expiration, notify XYZ. And then based off that, right, he can go and create a new secret key and share. That way, you can go to change management and say, we want to update secret key. And service doesn't have to fail, right? And security is still intact and governance is happy. I'm smiling because life is good. Everybody's a win-win for everybody just by using an existing investment that is there. Now, one thing I want to call out here quickly before we go is we can use locks, right? This is another way to secure, who can do what here. So you could be different people in your department, but different functions, and you want to make sure that nobody can delete this lock. Delete this vault and resource group. So you can put a lock here that can produce extra security. Just before we go, I'll just quickly dash into the Azure policy to give us a high level. Now, while we've looked at the vault system, what we can do with it at its various minimum, which the Azure Key Vault, you can see is a standard setting. It's already available if you have an Entra P2 and if you have an Entra P2 license, I think it's just available. And if you have a subscription, active subscription, it's available. And the standard setting, you secure secret keys and certificates in your environment. Now, once you come to Azure policy, just because, trust me, this will show way more information for a production environment, right? This is just my demo tenant, and I didn't have anything on this tenant before Azure Key Vault, right? So everything you see here is even related to Azure Key Vault. But what the policy does is that it leverages on Microsoft's inbuilt as definitions and assignments. You can come as compliance and create your own policy definition and assignment, or you can already leverage on some of it. So you can see here that there are some of the regulatory compliance, right, assignments that has been defined by Microsoft. Me 5 minutes, please. Sorry about 5 minutes. Thank you. All right. So there's some regulatory, you can see them here. You can see monitoring. So just by this default built-in definitions and assignments, your Azure policy can give you a dashboard to see certain policies that is using. And you can see here is already flagging that, I have a non-compliant state on something. And if I click on it, it can tell me what definition has been set. So once Azure policy, you can come up and say, we have a policy that you can, every virtual machine you set up should have a V network that is blah, 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 blah. All of those things you can define, and then the Azure policy will scan through your Azure tenant and based on that tell you your compliance state. So in this one, you can see a policy that monitors. So this is the default set of policy monitored by Azure Security Center. It was automatically assigned as part of onboarding to Security Center. So this is just talking about Security Center. And I have 3 non-compliant assets. More than 3. So you can see detection and analysis enable. I'm trying to look for something around key. Ensure security of key and certificate repository. So let's see what this. So you can see that this policy, while it's still loading, is talking about It says harden your key vault service through access control, network security, login monitoring, backup to ensure keys and certificates are always protected. Now, one of the things I know is flagging here is network security. So let's go back. If you go back here, guys, on the Azure Key Vault, you will see, remember, I just realized even I haven't talked about, if you come to networking, it's open. I seen it. It's open. Allow public access from all networks. So what I'm saying is that any network, anybody can connect to my vault. So that's not good, right? So you want to disable public access. You want to disable public access and only allow. So this is where you streamline this. So because of that this is allowed for more public network, the Azure policy baseline configuration was already flagging it, right? So this is where somebody in governance, risk, and compliance can come and say, how do I leverage on Azure to do my job? I know that this is all the requirements that the regulators require. But when I come to the guys to ask them, they're not answering me. Don't stress yourself. Tell them to give you access to Azure policy. Come to Azure policy and you will see all the things in your Azure that is not meeting company requirements. You would see everything from there, from compliance. So these are compliance findings. You would see the definitions that Microsoft has defined, and then you can now export this and use this as a baseline to even start, checking your organization, right? Just this, and you can even see remediation options that are available. Okay, we don't have any remediation policies to remediate here. Okay, so because these ones are strict compliance requirements, and you can now engage them based on this, right? And now say that, okay, it's not you. Azure policy is flagging that they don't have this, and it also helps the guys. Then they can know where the changes needs to be done, and they can go and make those changes. And based on this dashboard, you can say your organization has XYZ score and is compliant to this policy and this policy just by leveraging on Azure policy and Azure Key Vault. You can now, as an organization, bring that governance and compliance to your organization. I hope, as they say in the secondary school days, with these few points of mine, I've been able to get you to begin to think beyond seeing governance and risk and compliance as just guys with the notebook. You can leverage on the Azure infrastructure policy to understand the compliance level of your organization. As a security person, you can provide extra value to your organization by showing them how to leverage on Key Vault to save secret key certificates and manage key management, which gives them full compliance to NIST, PCI DSS, CISS, DORA, and we'll keep preaching the word of security. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Ma, for that wonderful session. It is we could feel your experience while you were taking the session, and we could say that yes, we've learned a lot from this session. Thank you so much for imparting the knowledge, and I'm sure that everyone, including myself, can testify that they've learned something new and tremendous today. Please, if you still have any question, you can go ahead and use the chat session, and if we would be here to assist you. And yes, so this was a very, very wonderful session. I believe she has done justice to all the questions that came in during the presentation. And if any questions still comes to your mind, even after the call, we have the Microsoft user group where you can always feel free to drop your question, and she would, or any of our facilitator will be there to respond to your questions. And so, thank you guys for joining in
Just
this
before
meetup.
we go, one thing,
Okay.
just before we go, and we can crop it off before we upload to YouTube, but I just feel like I needed to put it here that, one of the challenges that I've seen most times when people join programs like this is after the call, there's life. Many of you now will leave this call, you're going to grab dinner, or you're going to work, or, one issue. And unless you had a need for it, you struggle to come back. One good thing you can do is for every meetup you come to, take key points that stuck to you and do yourself a big favor, make a post about it, talk about it, right? The moment you make a post about it, it leaves a fingerprint on your digital presence that allows you to dig for further knowledge, right? So I have done this I'm now writing an article on Azure keywords. Simple. What stood out for you here? Relationship between governance and security, Azure keyword. Now you know. Like, say something. Never think that what you know, or that there's somebody that doesn't know what you have learned here today. And just by making that one post, you've created visibility for yourself. That's how you leverage on learnings, boot camps to skyrocket your career, right? Please, guys, don't just let whatever you do in the meetups, you join the meetups, make sure that you take, and then you can just say 5 things that stood out for me during the MCT Niger meetup this weekend. Boom, 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 boom. And that's it. And people would, come to you to say, what's this thing you're talking about? Can you explain? And that would push you to go and read more. And the more you read more, then you begin to become an authority, right? So well done, guys.
Thank you so much, Ma. So you've had it. Go to your status right now and post 5 things that you learned in the meetup today, and let people engage you so that you can add more knowledge and also engage them back with their questions. All right, so thank you guys for joining today, and see you guys in the next meetup, which we'll be discussing. What's our next topic again? We'll be talking on managed security posture by using the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So if you are new to the Defender for Cloud, or you want to learn more about the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, please put your notification, put your reminder for July 5th rather, and then join the next meetup. So thank you guys, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you everyone for joining. See you next month. Bye for now.
Bye.